Hello class, this is Professor Quigley and I am here in week 9 to help you get through 9.8. Now, this problem can be a little tricky, but it also can be simple in the fact that you're just declaring one function and all you're doing is getting a value from the user and passing it into that function. However, it could be tricky because not a lot of us understand even what binary code is. So I would encourage you that if you're getting stuck and you're getting hung up on what binary code is, go ahead and take a few moments to kind of research that on the internet and kind of understand how everything that we're doing in code can all go down to binary code, and everything is just a series of zeros and ones. However, once you understand that, then you'll realize that the logic is actually given to us here, and all we have to do in this problem is demonstrate our ability to take this logic, whether we understand it or not, and put it into a function. So I'm going to go ahead and click Start. Now I'm going to go ahead and backspace these 3 lines here. And if you're following along with the pseudocode document here, it basically tells us we need to write the function, and then here is the logic that needs to be contained in that function, and then we write the main function, and then below that we only have 3 lines that need to be contained in that main function. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and since I'm a lazy engineer, which remember the lazy ones are the best, I am going to copy this, paste this into line 1, because that has everything we need to get going. So function integer to binary, it's going to accept an integer called num, but it's not going to return anything. So I'm going to hit enter. We're going to go over 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3 spaces. And if you follow along with the pseudocode, basically it tells us while the value in the variable num is greater than 0. So we just know from the keywords that that's a simple while loop. Then we're going to put that value, we're going to put the value of num modulo 2 to output, and then assign the variable num the result of dividing num by 2. So that is done like this. So we'll say while num is greater than 0, and then we're going to go over 3 spaces here. So notice line 2 is indented into the function because that's the code that we want to execute under that function. And again, we're going to indent line 3 because this is the code we want to run only if we're inside that while loop on line 2. All right, so while num is greater than 0, we're going to put to output. What is it that we're going to put to output? We're going to put exactly what our pseudocode logic tells us, and that's going to be num modulo 2 to output. Then, if we follow along with the pseudocode, we're going to say num equals num divided by 2. And that's it for the first function. Now we have to write the actual program. So what we've written so far is a function that our main program will actually call. So let's go ahead and write that main program. So we're going to do function main. Now your main program doesn't have anything you pass into it, and it also doesn't return nothing. So function main returns nothing. I'll do my 3 spaces here, and I'm going to declare, because if you remember from the first weeks in this class, if we're going to have a value and hold it in memory, we have to store that in a variable. We have to give it a data type and a name. So integer user input. Now we're going to say that user input is going to equal get next input from the user. So real simple stuff that you guys have been doing for the last 8 weeks here. But now we're going to call our function. And to call our function, all we're going to do is reference the name, and then we have to pass in the variable. Now remember, we don't have to pass in the data type. The function just declares a data type here because it needed to know what num is actually going to be. But when we're calling it, you just pass in the variable itself. So I'm going to say integer to binary, and then in parentheses I'm going to pass in user input. Now notice num and user input have different names. That's okay, because in the function, these are just placeholders. That is basically, when you write that function, you're telling the computer, I need a variable that's an integer. Now you're going to call it something here because you're going to reference it inside that function. So when you call it integer num, everywhere you use that value that's passed in, you'll use it by name. But over here in this function has no idea what num is. All it knows is that when it calls integer to binary, it has to pass in an integer. And so you're going to pass this in, and it's going to be okay with it because it's going to know up here on line 7 that what you passed in is already an integer. So let's go ahead and check out that code there, and boom, That is all correct. So if you have any questions on that and you want to know why a particular line of code is the way it is and why it has to be that way, shoot me a message in the discussion threads. But until then, I look forward to helping you again, and I'll see you on the next problem. Take care.